to order. This is a regular meeting of the Northfield Public School Board. Today is Monday, February 9th, and the time is 6 p.m. This meeting is being live streamed and recorded. The recording of this meeting will be posted on the district website as soon as possible. Welcome members of our community here tonight to observe the important work being done on behalf of all school district stakeholders. Dr. Hillman, we have some items in the table file. Will you update us?
We have a few items in the table file this evening. We have some increase, decrease, and changes in assignment. We have a leave of absence, and we have retirement, resignation, and a termination.
Okay, there are no objections. We will add these items to the agenda as we move forward. Is there a motion to accept the agenda as presented? Moved by Jeff. Second? Thank you, Corey. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Right, motion passes. The next item is our public comment section, and we do have someone signed up to speak. I'll read our policy first, and then I'll call you up. This is an opportunity for residents, business, or property owners, parents, guardians, caregivers, students, and employees of the Northfield School District to address the board. All comments to the board must adhere to the guidelines set in place by District Policy 206 regarding public comment. This is not a time to debate an issue, but only for the board to hear your comments. You are prohibited from making comments about specific students, staff, and administrators. The board respects and values input, but when it relates to a specific individual or a specific matter, this input must be heard by the appropriate personnel, including the building principal or superintendent, and not during an open meeting of the school board. You will be gavelled out of order if your comments are not in compliance with these guidelines. Please address the board from the podium. After being recognized by the chair, identify yourself and if you represent a group. We require that you limit your remarks to 3 minutes. You're not allowed to yield your time to another person. It is expected that members of the public will address their remarks with civility and respect. Personal attacks by anyone addressing the board are unacceptable. The board has allotted up to a total of 30 minutes for public comment at regular school board meetings. I'll now begin to call those who have signed up to speak in the order which they signed in. Vice Chair Corey Butler will be monitoring the speaker's time. He will signal each speaker with the time they have remaining at 1 minute, 30-second, and 10-second intervals. Please make your comments as brief as possible, but no more than 3 minutes. Okay, and so I have Nick Gerhardt.
Close enough. I'll take it.
Okay, thank you. Come on up and help me pronounce your name.
Sure.
My name's Nick Gerhardt,
Welcome.
Gerhart, D as in David, T as in Thomas. Good evening, board and dignitaries. I am a game worker with the school district. In the winter, I run this clock for the hockey games. In the spring, I do lacrosse. In the fall, I do soccer. So I was just coming up today because it kind of came to my attention that I think us game workers are due for a raise. I understand everything's in the works and things are getting discussed, but I figured I was tired of having the same conversation with some of my coworkers about that, so I figured I'd do something about it and talk about it tonight. So we put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, especially when the press box window is open and the wind comes through, into our work of moving the clicker and adding the score to the scoreboard. So just thought we'd appreciate getting recognized for the effort. So that's all I got. I yield my time.
Okay, thank you so much. Thanks for coming up. All right, next item is announcements and recognitions. Dr. Hillman, do you have anything to add?
Yes, we have several this evening. The Hand in Hand Preschool, Early Ventures Learning Center, and Early Childhood Family Education will hold their open house on Thursday, February 26th at the Northfield Community Education Center. It will run from 5:45 to 7:15 p.m. Families are going to be able to tour the facility, see classrooms, and meet staff. And the fall registration for new families for those programs will be on March 5th. On January 21st, Greenville Park staff held an all-school read event. Students in all classrooms read the book Lubna and Pebble by Wendy Medore. This award-winning book has a powerful message of friendship, kindness, courage, loss, displacement, immigration, and emotional resilience. Classrooms partnered with cross-grade buddy classrooms to decorate rocks with a connection to the powerful message in the story. These are on display for conferences as an art installation in the display case. The Greenville Park PTO supported Books for the School event, and the concept of the all-school read was learned from Prairie Creek staff. The all-school read was organized by Greenville Park teachers who participated in the Open Windows Book Cohort Workshop. These teachers included Kimber Dimmick, Betsy McLaughlin, Pam Charlton, and Kate Carlson. So congratulations to Greenville Park, and particularly useful this evening when we are hosting Prairie Creek for their annual report to see how our charter schools have positively impacted us. We also want to congratulate Bodie Bulfer, Tommy Cahoon, and Maddie Loritz, who have qualified for the Alpine Ski State Tournament at Giants Ridge on February 10th. We also want to congratulate the following athletes for qualifying for the Nordic Ski State Tournament at Giants Ridge. That's on February 11th and 12th. Andy Amundsen, Max Beckman, Thisbe Jothan, Ann Demas, Michaela Patrica, Aaliyah Doherty, Eliza O. Cooper, Carmen Jeglia, and Mackenzie McQuiston. Alternatives are Eva Dam and Mariana Cruz. Best of luck to all of our skiers. I'm just so happy they had snow this year to actually participate. That's been the struggle for the last few seasons. And then finally today, we mentioned this late August, but the Minnesota Department of Education actually did some formal recognition this week. So we want to congratulate Northfield Middle School, who was recently recognized by the Minnesota Department of Education for excelling in academic performance and making significant strides in closing achievement gaps. Northfield Middle School was one of 8 schools in Minnesota to receive this honor and only one of 4 schools to receive recognition in both categories: exemplary high-performing schools and exemplary closing the gaps schools. The program was previously known as the National Blue Ribbon School Program. However, the United States Department of Education ended that program in August. Very few schools received this award, and even fewer earn recognition in both categories. So the honor reflects the dedication of our middle school staff, the hard work of our students, and the support of our families and community. And I can't emphasize how outstanding of a recognition this is for Northfield Middle School, and just cannot compliment the staff enough. They show up and do good things for kids every day, and I'm so pleased to see them recognized, not just with one measure, but 2. And again, it's incredibly rare to see a school get both of those recognitions. So the Department of Ed just was able to recognize this again after the US DOE shut down the program due to budget constraints last August. So we're just really excited for the middle school to be honored in this way. Those are your announcements and recognitions for this evening.
That's terrific. Thank you. Board members, do you have anything to add tonight? All right, then we will move on to our items for discussion and reports. Tonight we have Prairie Creek Community School and Arcadia Charter Schools annual reports presented by their director, Simon Tyler and Laura Stelzer. These reviews and written reports fulfill state requirements for annual reporting, as well as our district's request that each charter school authorized by Northfield Public Schools present an annual report to our school board. Welcome, Simon.
All right, good evening, everyone. I think the slides should pop up in a minute here, but I'll just say good evening while that's happening, and thank you for welcoming me once again in front of you. I was doing the math earlier. You'd think after 18 years I would know a little bit about standing closer to the mic. But there you go. So now, I've been coming in front of you both as director at Arcadia back in the day and 15 years now with Prairie Creek. So I appreciate you hosting once again. I know you've got a couple of reports relating to our school this evening, mine and also the authorizer liaison site visit report. So I'll endeavor to keep mine fairly brief, give you time for some questions, and give you a chance to hear that other report. It's really fun to be here always and to hear the announcements and recognitions. Congratulations to the middle school, by the way. That really is a huge accomplishment. And also listening to Dr. Hillman, it's fun to hear a few Prairie Creek familiar names amongst the skiers. And most excitingly for me, the connection with Greenville Park regarding the All School Book Club, Lubna and Pebble, which was the first book we used for that initiative. And I think last year shared us a brief video about an innovation award. And the big idea with charter schools was always innovation would happen. That innovation could possibly inform teaching and learning in other spaces too. So when it actually happens in such a concrete way like that, it's really so exciting and so affirming of the relationship that we've established and you have supported. So thank you for that. A little bit about our mission, just a refresher. Our mission remains unchanged. It's built around these 4 pillars of Prairie Creek being a community school, a child-centered school, a progressive education school, and working to make the world a better place. And that mission is underpinned by 12 value statements that we really try and live and breathe our program around each year. It's a really exciting time for us to be studying our mission. We're taking a deep dive into it this year because we're coming to the end of a strategic planning cycle. We're approaching what we hope will be a renewal of contract with you, our authorizer. And so it's a really good moment for us to do some grounding around who we are. We're finding in conversations with staff, with community members, with board members, that the values are still very strong for us. These pillars are still very strong for us, but of course a mission review and evaluation is also an opportunity to look forward. And we're doing a lot of thinking about what does it mean to be a sustainable and thriving public progressive education school, because that's what we are and that's what our mission reminds us that we're always working towards. So I'll share a little bit more about how that sort of plays out in the slides. I think I jumped forward just a little bit here. Well, my slides got out of sorts, but let's go with what we got. We're a little out of order, but that's just fine. I can pivot. So let's jump straight to the fun stuff, our standardized test scores. So I always, in this presentation, just give you the overview, the snapshot of how we're doing by this evaluation measurement. You know, that piece that I just said about us working to be a sustainable and thriving public progressive education school acknowledges that we are accountable to the same measures as any public school, and that includes the Minnesota Comprehensive Assessments. And as you can see from the chart here, you've got 4 years of our last sort of contractual period covered by standardized test data, and we consistently perform above the state averages. And you'll see some fluctuations in our data over those 4 years, but really considering the small cell size and how vulnerable we are to some shifts depending on the small group being assessed, pretty consistent data too. We were particularly pleased, I think, last year with the science data. There was a big change in the science assessment, and we performed strongly on that assessment despite quite a significant shift. The year before, I think I fielded a couple of questions about why that science data had dropped from the prior year, and I talked a little bit about the small cell size and how that can impact that. So I also want to acknowledge that in the other direction too. But we did spend a lot of time thinking about the change in the assessment that students were going to receive and how our students needed to be prepared for that. The math and the reading, as you can see, the data is pretty consistent over the 4 years. Reading went up slightly, like everyone else. We're in the midst of the READ Act process, implementing that. I think it'll be a few years of assessment, different assessments, looking at FastBridge, looking at the new CAPTI assessment before we really see the impact of those instructional changes if they do show up in standardized data. The left-hand side of this slide really speaks to the fact that although we are very attentive to standardized assessment, we really, by mission, look at lots of different ways to know kids. That includes writing child-centered narratives for the children. We've just done a round of that in our conferences. Formative assessments, of course, but a lot of things that tie more into the experiential nature of our program, looking at performances, looking at research projects, independent research projects, how students are engaging with theme, arts, and so on and so forth. including the habits of mind. We've now been utilizing the 16 habits of mind as a useful rubric and evaluation piece for, I think, the best part of 15 years now at Prairie Creek. It continues to be a useful tool for us thinking about the whole child. See what slide comes up next. Oh, it's the financial management one. We really are going to the fun stuff early in this. This slide is a continuation of a slide I bring you every year. Again, a bit like the standardized assessment data, its purpose is to show you the trend data, the overall data. This is built out in a much more depth in our financial report, audit financial documents, of course, that the authorizer reviews each year. But as you can see, we've maintained a pretty steady fund balance. We completed FY25, I think, at 43% fund balance, a slight increase, but it's been pretty steady across the period of the last contractual cycle. We have a lot of conversations around this sustainability piece of being a small public school in our finance committee board work at Prairie Creek. We're always looking at least 3 to 5 years out with our financial forecasting. As a small school, we do maintain a higher fund balance than most traditional districts do. That's because, again, we're vulnerable to shifts in enrollment or other financial needs that can hit a small program. So I think this is a model of good sort of fiscal conservative health that you see before you. And we're also looking forward and anticipating that fund balance could decline in coming years. We're seeing increasing costs in things like health insurance, utilities, 1 or 2 tricky, not so well-funded mandates which have come through in the last couple of years. So we're starting at a position of strength here. But as we go into the next strategic planning cycle, we're looking 3 to 5 years out and saying, how do we maintain our fund balance policy, which is to have at least a 20% fund balance in our 3-year forecasting. So we're on track for that. We're in good shape. But like every other public school and public school district, I think it's something we're keeping an eye on. A few future plans. I wanted to build out our strategic actions that we're talking about. The arts residency has been a key strategic focus for us for the last 10 plus years. We've been on a 3-year cycle, which includes every 3rd year a residency with St. Olaf College to create an opera with the students. In between that, we attend to different arts disciplines in our residency model. We maintain not a huge, but a strong enough budget line to ensure that the residency will happen, regardless of whether we're able to write a grant or not. And that was the case this year. We hired a mosaic artist to come in, and what you see on the slide there is a group of children looking at the culmination of that 2-week residency, where the whole school created that beautiful mosaic which depicts the 9 birds that the 9 classrooms are named after, and that now adorns the wall of the concourse at our school. So it was a really beautiful experience. And we're always, again, like everything else, planning forward on a strategic cycle around what's the next residency going to be. Next year, we'll be welcoming St. Olaf back as part of that cycle. And we have a very robust arts committee that helps with that planning, that includes stakeholders from inside and outside the building. The community garden development, I have another slide for that, I'll come back to it. And then a key strategic area, of course, is READ Act implementation. The READ Act was a huge piece of legislation that we have now completed all the required training for all our licensed staff. We're about to enter into a cycle of 8 hours of training for paraprofessionals and teaching assistants too, so they can support licensed teachers around foundational literacy. That'll be happening in the next couple of months. And we're in our 1st year of utilizing a new curriculum. We use the University of Minnesota Carryall Foundational Phonics and Morphology curriculum. And as we're moving through the year, we're assessing and evaluating how does it fit with our progressive model, what are we seeing as the outcome of that foundational literacy scope and sequence structure, and adjusting as needed as we go forward. So that's a busy time, and I think as regards to literacy, I think we've seen a lot of positives through the conversations we've had around that, but it certainly dominated a lot of our professional development time. So one thing we're excited for in this strategic plan is to look at our progressive education focus of professional development, and I think lean back a little more into some different pieces around progressive pedagogy as we look to how we build out our old model of teacher-led committees. I'm missing one slide.
I
Let's
think
see
the
if it
slide you're
shows up.
missing, Simon,
Yeah.
is the one that talks about the forest classroom community
Yeah,
garden.
that's the
Wolf
missing
Ridge.
one. Oh, look at it. Yeah, Attempt to rescue.
Just reloaded here. Simon's a pro, though. He can, there you go, just adapt on his feet.
There it is. There it is. And you know, the really fun one didn't show up, of course, which has 4 pictures on it. So this is our Connecting to Nature Environmental Stewardship. Every time I come before you, I try and sort of tease out a different element of our program. And I talked about those 12 value statements. The last value statement is this: we nurture a close connection with nature and promote environmental stewardship. And this is not a new thing at Prairie Creek. You've probably heard me talk about it before on prior visits. I think it's just an area which has a lot of energy for us right now, and has been a big part of the year I'm reporting on. We created the Hoop House that you see in the picture as a project with some St. Olaf environmental studies students who collaborate with Prairie Creek students in an environmental club. And you can see one of the St. Olaf students there doing an activity down by the creek with students as well. With the help of a grant, we've fenced off that area now, started building some garden beds, built some benches inside the Hoop House. I think the next couple of years will be a really exciting time for developing a community garden model. The collaboration with St. Olaf is ongoing for us. In the next semester, the students from St. Olaf are going to help us look into some grant writing opportunities and really building out ideas with the students around how we want to enhance our outdoor program and how they can support that. And we nurture other networks too in regard to outdoor learning, particularly the Green School Network, which is a sort of fairly vibrant national network with attended conferences there. And each year, our 35th graders attend the Wolf Ridge Environmental Learning Center. So as part of our strategic work going forward, I think we'll be looking at how do we sort of grasp hold of all the disparate components of connecting with nature and promoting environmental stewardship, and what are our goals over the next sort of 3 to 5 years in that regard. But there's some exciting things already happening. I think that probably takes me to where I wanted to end, which was here. Questions and opportunities for any discussion.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Simon. We appreciate you being here. And that was a really wonderful update, really wonderful report. Board members, do you have any comments at this time? Corey?
Hi, Simon. Always good to see you. Welcome back. Just one question, not related necessarily to your report, but you did mention a few times your strategic plan.
Yeah.
You said you're coming up on the end of the cycle. I'd be curious to hear something that was successful during the current cycle, and maybe something you thought could have a little extra work, if anything.
Yeah, I mean, we've been reflecting on the last few years. I think a big success piece for us, we started that plan coming out of the pandemic, of course. So like all schools, we were sort of assessing how do we rebuild community, how do we welcome families back into the building. So a really strong component of that plan was community connections. we have a teacher who leads our community connections group in collaboration with some parents, and we just created a lot of informal spaces, opportunities for families and children to connect with each other. And I think that's been really important to us. And now we're thinking like, okay, how do we systemize that? How do we keep it within a balanced space? Because there's a lot of work that goes into that kind of community engagement in terms of leadership. So that's one area. I think the other piece coming out of that tricky time was staffing. We invested a lot into the St. Thomas residency program. We've now hired, in the past 5 years, we've hired 5 licensed teachers through that St. Thomas Charter School residency program. So we really invested in that. It's a grant-supported program, but it meant that folks who were paraprofessionals in our school were able to get a teaching license over a couple of years while being supported and mentored by the school. And then we have the opportunity to hire those. So we've hired 3 special education teachers and 2 general education teachers in the last 5 years through that program. So these are well-qualified well-qualified faculty who deeply understand our mission. So if I was going to pull out a couple of things, it would probably be those, because they were definitely key players in our sort of stabilizing ourselves post-pandemic. And then, Corey, was there a second part
No,
to
I
your
think
question?
you got
Okay,
it. Thank
thanks.
you. And I'll just say I appreciate the collaboration over the many years.
Yeah.
Obviously, Prairie Creek and Arcadia, for that matter, are a huge part of the fabric of our community, and really appreciate the work you both are doing at your schools.
Yeah, thank you.
Jeff, did you have something?
Thanks for your report. I was just going to say on, being out in Castle Rock for many years,
Yeah.
I'm kind of not too far originally from that area. What are some pros and cons you think of being located there? I mean, it must be almost like the most northern part of the school district. But
Yeah.
So, I mean, just to elaborate a little bit on the location, I'm sure some things are, necessary. I'll let you talk about that.
Yeah, that's a terrific question, Jeff. We enjoy our place in Castle Rock. In one of the slides, I talked about outdoor learning, and part of the beauty of being where we are, sort of on the sort of in between Northfield and Farmington, is you've got rich farmland there. There's a creek that runs alongside the school. We're really able to embed ourselves in place-based learning and get to know that land well and forge connections with that local community. It's a small community, but we've established relationships with the bank, with the post office, with the farmer's mill and elevator, in over time in quite meaningful ways. We're also located in a beautiful old school. The school's actually 100 years old. It was the original public school back in the day that served the rural community. So it's a gorgeous building. It's a little bit of a idiosyncratic building, and part of our strategic planning will be a building evaluation to make sure we're preparing to keep that place in good shape for many years to come. So those are all benefits. I think the other benefit is for where we're located. We're almost as close to Farmington as we are to Northfield. So we definitely attract families from the Farmington area, from Lakeville. So we're able to provide the sort of programming we do, not just to Northfield residents, but to residents from neighboring districts. We have students from Cannon Falls, from the Randolph area. And you have a lot of conversations with Dr. Hillman and Derek Hiller about this in regard to, I think in a way, we're sort of Northfield centered, but we bring awareness to Northfield from these neighboring communities. So I always tout that as one of the things we bring to the relationship is families often come to Prairie Creek, get to know us, and by association, learn a lot about the Northfield community and the Northfield district. And this is anecdotal, but I kind of lost track of a number of families who joined Prairie Creek and then connected with Northfield Middle School, Northfield High School, Northfield community, because they just liked that community and area. And we were just a connection for that. So I see that as a positive too. Challenges, yeah, we're a little isolated, so we work really hard on our relationships with local law enforcement. We work with Dakota County law enforcement. We work really hard with the transportation services. We have an excellent relationship with Benjamin Bus, and it's a real privilege to have them bringing students out from Northfield to our school as well. So those are all pieces just to be managed. Thank you. Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, Amy.
Hi, Simon. Welcome.
Hi,
As
Amy.
a parent of a Prairie Creek alum, I always love hearing updates from you. And I have a couple questions.
Yeah.
First, I love the conversation you were just having about introducing students to Northfield. And I'm just going to say to Superintendent Hillman, that might be a question someday when we're looking at why people are coming into the district is, are they coming in through Prairie Creek? And should we be disseminating more information to those students through you? So just an idea. Also, in your text report, you mentioned how Prairie Creek's a very popular school. You're enrolled at capacity.
Mhm.
But then when you were talking about your fund balance, you were talking about how you wanted to have a nice fund balance because enrollment might fluctuate.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering if you see any issues with enrollment that you might be concerned about with the changing demographics, with fewer students entering
Sure.
the system. How are
Sure.
you approaching that? Or do you just think you're popular enough that you'll be able to ride the wave and not worry too much about enrollment?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think I used the enrollment example as a vulnerability for small schools and small charter schools as a generalization. I think it is a challenge for some small schools. We've had the good fortune in the last few years to be fully enrolled and have a really strong wait list, and that's currently the case now. I think we have over 100 students on our wait list at present. So that's not an immediate concern. Our forecast is that we will be able to maintain full enrollment going through the next cycle. I think the financial challenges for us are really in other spaces. The cost of increasing health insurance, utilities, cost of maintaining buildings, and frankly, the cost of meeting some of the legislative mandates we've had over recent years, where there's been some funding present, but also schools have had to pick up the slack in a couple of areas as well. I think we've chatted about these in the past. Areas for us that aren't huge, but bring a cost to us. The changes in food programming is a good example. Some of the cost of implementing legislation like the READ Act. So those are more the things we're keeping an eye on, and probably the areas where having a fund balance will help us sort of ride through a strategic cycle while we make a longer term plan to manage that.
The state covers school lunches for you as well? Or
Yeah, so we do get funding for school lunches, but the cost of providing the lunch in a small program exceeds the reimbursement from state. So I was more referencing the good initiative that I understand to provide free lunch for all students also created a need for additional staffing, additional costs for the management of that. So a little bit of that now gets crossed over from our general ed program into the budget that manages that. Again, not a huge problem, but it's something we attend to as we look forward. Yeah.
And then I have one
Yeah.
more question. As we're looking to the future, one of the big topics we're discussing this year is a later start for our middle school and high school. And we're just in the very early stages of that discussion, but
Okay.
it would affect Prairie Creek in ways that we don't know yet because no decisions have been made. But I'm just wondering if you had any thoughts about that topic that you would want to share with us.
Yeah.
So we can keep them in mind as we're moving forward.
Well, in all honesty, I didn't prepare any comments on that, and it's not something that I've studied. So I should perhaps lean in with a little bit more of an ear to that conversation. Yeah, It's a great question, but I'm not sure I could answer it without really knowing more about what the impact would be for Prairie Creek kids. I imagine changes could involve bus schedules and all those pieces. So, no, Amy, I'm afraid I haven't listened in on those conversations, but now I've got a useful conversation for Dr. Hillman and Daryl if there's anything that could impact us. Yeah.
Right, and that's great, and we're still
Yeah.
very early, and it's not anything
Yeah.
that's happening soon. So,
Yeah.
yes, we'd love to
Sure.
get input from everywhere we can.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right. If there aren't any more questions, then we'll let Simon step away and invite
Thanks.
Laura up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll see if I can do this. Can you hear me okay with the mask? Okay. I didn't want to reschedule because I know how difficult that is, and I just thought, well, if they can handle a little bit of sniffling, then I can probably get through it just fine. All right, so Arcadia from last year. I always like to start with our mission, and one of the highlights for this past year was really restorative practices and the arts, how those two things interact. Rebecca McCam has been working with Arcadia for the last 4 years, on implementing restorative practices with us. And so I have this quote from her book that we used as one of our texts as we were working through implementing restorative practices at the school. And I think when she calls out that restorative practices represent the ways in which we give our humanity presence in the midst of a complex story of public education, I think that also really connects to the reason that the arts are so central to the work that we do at Arcadia. And so I wanted to just make that connection between Arcadia has always been a large supporter of the arts and pulling the arts in. We just finished our witness residency, arts residency last week with Carla Nuege, who led the development of little sketches looking at 3 women, Black women from Minnesota who have made a huge impact in the world. So Dr. Retha Clark King, Dr. Josie Johnson, and a woman named Rose McGee. And so we just completed that, and I think it really bringing that idea of humanity back into the center over and over. We start our school year with those 4 days of civic engagement and really pulling together our student contract. And that social contract is really the foundation of the work that we do. And so we keep centering that in our story as well. You can see also the Arcadia Restorative Process 2025-2026. So we've built that out a little more robustly so that people can really see the work that we are doing with that as we work through helping students grow into the best versions of themselves. So our Arcadia rubric, we're still using that to sort of measure our progress toward our mission and vision. And so the 4 sections are progressive, equitable and inclusive, growth and transition focused, and project-based learning. Equitable inclusive, you can really see that with the restorative practices work and the arts residencies. And the project-based learning piece, of course, is always central to what we do since that is the basis of our charter as a school, as a charter school. A lot of our professional development has continued to center around restorative practices. We also spent a lot of time last year on math, and I can talk a little bit more about that as we look at our scores. And then we continue to use the PBL Works materials to talk about project-based learning. One of the pieces that I think I've probably talked about before, but I continue to emphasize, is that we really started out with that EdVisions model, which was one version of project-based learning that was very open. Students were going to just meet all the standards by coming up with projects, and it was the idea was to be very student-driven, but what we know about learning is that it's very hard to come up with an interesting question if you don't have good foundational knowledge. And so as we've shifted toward having that coursework piece run alongside that independent project piece, they both have their infinite electives where they can explore the things that are of interest to them and really develop in those areas, but they are also getting really solid educational, like foundational knowledge that they can use to ask better questions. And so that PBL Works piece allows those classes that they're taking to also be project-based. So instead of saying, okay, the independent project work is one thing and the courses are another, it's bringing both of those pieces together with project-based learning. I talk a lot about restorative practices and the disciplinary referrals piece because I think it's so powerful. In the past 3 years, I have not suspended a single student. Every conversation that we've had has really built that community and brought people back into community or helped them decide what community fit was best for them. And so I have really been impressed by how the students have really taken that community culture and built it themselves, how the staff have really participated in that. When I first started at Arcadia, I was getting like 2 or 3 people in my office a day. I have 0 people in my office on a day-to-day basis. So we really look at skill development and we think about what is the skill we need to teach for this child to succeed. And we now have a project in every class. Student achievement, so our MCA data, with that change in the science test, we still perform quite well, especially compared to the state average. Our math scores continue to lag, and that has been, we have kind of a complex story around why math lags. For example, the 6th graders last year, over half had a math goal, and we only have so many people being tested, and so that does really impact. If you have people who we know are going to probably not be at grade level in math, it's not perhaps a surprise, but I think we've worked really hard on telling the story about math in the last couple of years, and I'm hoping to see this change. I think it's really critical that all students be proficient in math. I think our world is so based on mathematics and mathematical ideas. So we have changed our curriculum. That change happened last year, 2024, 2025. So there is maybe some of this is an implementation dip as well. It's a new curriculum. We also changed sort of who was teaching what. So our K5 or 512 licensed math teacher, who is phenomenal, she really understands scope and sequence and how math builds, is now in control of the whole algebra sequence so that we can make sure that students are ready for Algebra 2 since they must take that to graduate. So we've made a number of changes that I think will ultimately help us move that math progress forward. But it's maybe going to take a couple of years to really see the fruit of that work. And then it did help me in my desire to get a multi-tiered system of supports going at Arcadia. And so we are now fully implementing a multi-tiered system of supports, which took a little bit of convincing because it's such a small school. People felt like we were maybe already doing some of that, but I think this gives us a framework that's really clear to make sure that we are collecting data, looking at the data, and really making good choices for kids. I did throw in our comprehensive achievement and civic readiness goals just so that you knew what they were for the last year. When we originally set up the Close the Achievement Gap between student groups, that has now changed. It's specifically racial or socioeconomic gaps. So this year's goal looks different, but the board and the parents on the district advisory committee were really hesitant to have a lower number in the percentage who would take the MAP test, who would demonstrate growth. And so they set it very high. We didn't end up meeting it. Only about 50% demonstrated growth based solely on that test. If you look at other measures, that doesn't necessarily tell the whole story. It's one test once in the fall and once in the spring. But so we did not meet that goal. There are senior projects. All students do a senior project. They get a lot of support to do that. They meet with their advisor weekly and do some really wonderful things, some really unique things. Some of our projects last year included completely refurbishing a boat. We've had students do very science-based work, especially working with Carleton or St. Olaf. So the one that I think of is the impact of mycorrhiza on prairie plant root systems, which was a really impressive amount of research that this person did at the greenhouse up at Carleton and then reported on that, and it was publishable research. And then goal number 3, all students graduate. So this is not based on our 4-year graduation rate. So if you look at the MDE report card, it's going to say like 88% or 90% or something like that. But within a year after their senior year, we tend to have 100%. And maybe one time we had somebody who took a little longer than a year, but really everybody who starts at Arcadia and intends to graduate, graduates. A few additional measures of student achievement from last year. So we had our 100% graduation rate, 9 PSEO and Carleton/St. Olaf honors participants. We tend to have a lot of people doing PSEO. This year we have 10. We were up to 12, I think, in the first part of the year, and now 10 because one of them transferred to Northfield High School because AP classes. 100% of seniors complete that project. We are still offering bilingual seal testing, and we've had 6 students who have received certificates or seals since 2020, which is pretty exciting. And that emphasis on language and the importance of language continues at Arcadia as well. And then, of course, the no significant disciplinary referrals. Our average daily membership tends to be around 113, and in the last few years, that's kind of where it's been. That's what we are estimating for this year as well. So back in like just after the pandemic, we had a big rise in the number of people enrolling, I think probably due to the small school, and they liked the idea that it was very small with lots of exterior doors. And then we kind of went back to our usual there, but it did rise back after FY24. We did sort of see a drop. We suddenly had no 6th graders. We had 8 or 9 6th graders that year, and then that came back this year, or this past year. Financially, we are really on track. We had to make some very difficult decisions in FY24 that set us up for success in FY25 and allowed us to continue growing our fund balance. We had to cut 2.5 FTE, and that did have an impact, but we did use that to our advantage. We went from every other day social studies and English to every day English and social studies. It did mean fewer overall elective offerings, but that project work time piece is still in there, and they still have the opportunity to explore the things that they're interested in. So I think we have done a pretty good job of managing ourselves financially. The rising cost of benefits did lead to this year, I recommended a move to an ICRA program, and that has saved us over $60,000. So I'm hopeful that this year as well, we'll continue to see a solid, healthy fund balance. It may go down a little bit from that 40.77, but we should stay on track to be in pretty good shape. Our fund balance policy states that we'll have a minimum of 20%. All right. Do you have any questions for me?
Thank you, Laura. Great report, thorough and very positive. Board members, do you have anything you'd like to ask at this time? Yep. Amy?
Thank you for the report and the update. First, congratulations on no disciplinary referrals. That's
pretty awesome.
big. And I'm wondering, what percentage of your student body right now has IEPs?
We were getting close to 50%. We've had some people exit, so it's probably around like 44 right now. Yeah.
And you're doing, that's great all around. And I'm wondering if you've had a problem with malicious spell casting or people having to build bridges, being forced to build bridges.
You read the student social contract.
I did.
So every year they like to put a little like Easter egg for themselves in there, and that was last year's, was no malicious spell casting. No, we had no issues with malicious spell casting last year, so everybody came out unscathed. Mm-hmm.
Excellent, excellent.
This year it's no unauthorized musicals.
It's funny.
I guess you get to authorize a musical, though.
Well, they can petition a petition by 2/3 of the student body or something like that to allow an authorized, then it becomes an authorized musical, and then it's acceptable. So.
Well, thank you for all you're doing for these students.
Mm-hmm.
Very good. Thank you, Laura. I appreciate you.
Absolutely.
If there aren't any other comments or questions, then we'll let Laura go.
Oh, I did want to say on the school start time thing, the research on that is pretty clear to me, at least what I've seen, that for middle and high school, that would have a very positive impact. So I would certainly like to see what you're proposing and hear more about that. So.
Great, no proposals yet.
All right, item B tonight is a presentation by Dr. Hillman and Director of the ALC, Daryl Keller, on their recent visits to our charter schools. Welcome, Daryl.
Hello.
So we've included the two reports from our authorizer site visits in your packet. Daryl did a great job keeping notes. We have leveraged some artificial intelligence tools to be able to help us summarize those visits to be an efficient way to do that. And what we thought might be best, just in partnership with the two charter school presentations tonight, is to let the reports stand. As you saw in the reports, they are overwhelmingly positive. We had a great experience at both schools, as usual. And we thought we would just take any questions that you have in general about those two reports, or any other questions you might have about our relationship with the charter schools in general this evening, reminding you that we are now the only traditional public school district remaining in Minnesota that still goes through the rigorous process of becoming a charter school authorizer, and just thank Daryl for all of his work. So I know that board members had the reports in the packet. They were available on the website. If you had questions about those two reports, we'd stand ready to answer questions now.
Very good. Board members, do you have any questions? Okay, Corey?
I appreciate the syncing of these reports. I know in prior years they were kind of offset, so appreciate that. And for the reports to stand, as you said, Dr. Hillman, they're positive, and I'm always glad to see them. We heard from the two leaders here, so good to hear all that. I was curious about the process of renewing our authorization, where that stands now. I know we're coming to the end of that current agreement. I know it's typically a 5-year plan. How's that start in earnest? I know it's a lot of behind the scenes work, but just for the public and for the board to know where we go from here.
Yeah, I'll just frame it a bit and then have Daryl talk. So we are going through what's called the MAPES process this year. It's the recertification process to become an authorizer. It is a rigorous process, and I believe it's even more rigorous this time than it was the last time. So MDE runs the recertification of authorizers in a cohort model. So we are together with several other authorizers who are going through that recertification this year. Daryl has been leading that for us. We're getting good support from the department, but it is a very robust process. Why don't you talk a little bit about it,
Yes.
Daryl?
Yes. So they did, and I do believe this is just purely my opinion or my thoughts, but I do believe that's partly why we're the only school district left standing, so to speak, because it is changed this year. And so the process is a little bit different than it has been in the past. And so they have a list of requirements, and then you just basically have to provide the list of here's how we're meeting that requirement or statute, depends on if it's an MDE requirement or in statute. And so then it's just providing the evidence to MDE, and then they have, they're contracted with a group that reviews all those, gives feedback, and then just works with you to make sure that you have all those areas met and that you are consistently, we have the two charters, but the other authorizers, some have many, many charters that they're working with. And so just making sure that you're using consistent practice amongst the charters that you authorize. And so, yes, so it is quite a process right now. The initial submission is due February 20th, so a week from Friday. And so I'm working through just making sure all that, and then we'll get the feedback on what areas may need more documentation or review or edits, and then go through that process and just work through it. But it's a fair amount of work.
And I would come back to say too, it's more robust, and then there are even parts that this time we are exempt from as a traditional public school district. That's something that we actually lobbied for, was that there are capacity things that other single-purpose authorizers are required to do, that we had made an argument to the legislature that we should be exempt from, things like, how the organization carries its mission, or describing our capacity, including the positions that are allocated to authorizing duty. So there are some things that we don't have to do that other single-purpose authorizers still need to do, and it's still a significant amount of work.
Yep. Yeah, and there's some other things too, like we did not in this last cycle have any new charter applicants, which other authorizers had some. And so there's some aspects that we didn't go through. We didn't terminate any charters, that kind of thing. And so there's some parts that didn't pertain to us, but we still have to outline our process in case that were to happen and provide evidence for what we would do if that were to happen.
And I think Simon mentioned that we're in the final year of the current agreement.
Yes, yep.
So is this through the fiscal year?
Yep, so for Prairie Creek, this is the last year of the contract, and so we're going through that renewal process right now. And so Simon and I have met on a couple occasions just to go through, make sure we did receive the letter of intent from Prairie Creek to renew. And so we're just going through that. There's a renewal application. We'll go through that and then go through the contract as well. Right now, our timeline, you'll probably hear from us hopefully April for the contract things. It's not due till the end of June, but we just want to try and be ahead of it a little bit so it's not last minute.
And Arcadia's a year behind then?
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
great, thank you.
Yeah.
Nice. Jennifer, any question?
Daryl, welcome. I just wanted to thank you because over the years have seen your position become sort of a catch-all for a lot of different important areas, and you're doing such a great job with it all. So know that we see you and we appreciate you and all that you're doing for the district and for our charter schools.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, the next item is also presented by Daryl. So if you'd like to say at the podium, it's the Indigenous American Indian Parent Meeting Service Update and Vote of Concurrence.
Yes. So this is other duties as assigned, as Amy suggested. So I'll wait for the screen to change here. So basically, what we're required to do annually is we have, I think it's on this one here, we have what's called an APAC, American Indian Parent Advisory Committee, and that's an annual meeting that we have to go over the goals for that American Indian Education Aid. And so we go annually, make those goals. This parent committee then has to approve those goals, and then this process, the vote of concurrence, is say, where were we with those goals, and they all have to agree, like, yeah, adequate progress was made. They vote on both the new goals and the level of progress made on the current goals. And so that's what this meeting is. And then I'll fill out a report, submit that to MDE as well to say the vote of concurrence happened. The vote of non-concurrence, if there's some disagreement over that, then we'd have a different process to go through. But we did have concurrence at the vote or at the meeting on the 30th of January. And this is due March 1st, so it's right around the corner. All right. So district vision, starting the APAC meetings as well as this meeting. We prepare every student for lifelong learning, developing critical thinkers who are curious and ready to engage in our society. This is the mission and eligibility for the American Indian Education Program specifically. So I'll let you read through that. Basically, if you are an enrolled member or your parent is an enrolled member, that would qualify you in this category. And so there's different areas that you have to address in this plan. And so the first area, and you'll see this repeat throughout the slides, is support post-secondary preparation for American Indian pupils. And so on the left-hand side, you see the action steps that the district did to support students. And on the right-hand side, you'll see the goals and the outcomes of each area. So for this first one, there was 2 goals for that post-secondary preparation. The first one is increase the percentage of American Indian students with consistent attendance from 76% in the first quarter of 24-25 to 90% by the end of the year of 24-25. And so it's worth noting as we go through these, it's going to be a little wonky because this process happens in the middle of the year. And so you have goals that you're setting for the whole next year, but you really only have progress for halfway through the year because of how the goals are set up. So it's a little bit wonky, but I'll do the best to explain as we go through. So this first one, it was 76 to 90 by the end of the year. We did have, at the end of 24-25, 91% attendance for the end of the school year. And then this year, through the first semester, it was 93%. So we did meet that goal from 76 to 90 for both the end of the year and where we currently are in this year. And then the second goal, we will increase the graduation rate of American Indian students to 95% for the 25-26 school year. So at the end of the 24-25 school year, we had a graduation rate of 85.7 because we had 6 out of 7. So basically, there is no 95%, it was 85 or 100%. And so we had 6 out of the 7 American Indian students graduate, and the one student that didn't is continuing their education this school year. So they did not drop out, they're still working on that graduation mark. The area 2, support the academic achievement of American Indian pupils. This also had 2 goals. And so 100% of American Indian preschoolers will be screened by the age of 4. And we did have 100% of American Indian preschools at the start of this school year, 25-26. And then 70% will be considered proficient in reading and math by the end of 3rd grade, 6th grade, 8th grade as measured by the MCAs. And we had proficiency rates in the spring of 25, so this is part of that wonkiness, of 52% for math and 47% for reading. And so for some of these goals, this one included, what I'm proposed to the APAC, and they approved this idea, is instead of having the MCAs, because of when the testing happens and when the test results come out, it's a year later, we're moving to what Simon mentioned, like FastBridge and other assessments that we're now shifting to more formative assessments, so then we can keep a closer eye and we don't have to wait a year to see what happened. And so for the upcoming American Indian program goals, when I present that in the fall of this upcoming school year, you'll see that some of those goals have changed to more formative, so it's a little bit more, we can keep a closer eye on it instead of kind of guessing what will happen a year later. Area 3, make curriculum relevant to the needs, interests, and cultural heritage of American Indian pupils. And so there was some legislative changes that made this a requirement to have this in schools. And so what right now the goal was 80% of surveyed American Indian students and families will report satisfaction with current curriculum and offered programming. And so 100% of the members at the APAC meeting reported satisfaction. So everyone that was at the meeting agreed with that, so we had 100%. I am going to send out a survey because of the wonkiness. It was the middle of the year. We still have some stuff happening this school year, so I'm going to send out a survey to the families and get for this whole school year that result as well, which I'll report next school year. And then area 4, provide positive reinforcement of the self-image of American Indian pupils. And so for this one, we use what's called the SSIS. It's a social emotional screener that we used district-wide. And so for the SSIS survey, the goals were 80% or more will report no internalizing or externalizing behavior concerns. And for the fall of 25-26, we had 40% of American Indian students report no internalizing concerns, and 70% report no externalizing concerns. And the second part, which we had a good discussion at the APAC meeting, 80% or more will report having well-developed social emotional skills. We had 96% report having well-developed social emotional skills. So there was the conversation that we had at the meeting was that disconnect, where 96% said they had well-developed social emotional skills, but 40% were reporting internalizing concerns. And so that disconnect, we had a good conversation with the families that were present and what the thoughts were with what was going on there. One of the suggestions that they had for this upcoming plan was to dissect that by age group to see if there was something to do with the age of the students. And then the final one, this one's a little, so it's already a little convoluted. This one's even more convoluted because of kind of what happened. So last year we had Dr. Anton Schroyer come and speak to all the staff during the professional development day. And in the plan, it was written that he was going to come this year, a week from today actually, to the professional development day and speak again. That's not the case. He's not going to come a week from today. We have different plans for that professional development day. And so that has changed. He is coming to speak to, so the Northfield High School English 9th grade class and the ALC Native American Lit class both read his book, Where Wolves Don't Die. And so he's going to come to speak to the 9th graders in the morning and the ALC students in the afternoon on February 27th. And then there will be a 4 to 5:30 community event on that same day where he'll talk about his other book, Everything You Want to Know About Indians But Were Afraid to Ask. And so there's 2 books that he wrote. He's written more books, but those are the 2 that he'll be speaking on. And so we're going to change that. We amended that goal from a staff professional development day to that community event that's going to happen on the 27th. And so that's what the first part there, it says 100% of district staff will report increased awareness of American Indian culture and core beliefs after attending the winter professional development. That was 100% from the February 17th, 2025 event that happened. And the amended goal is 100% of attendees will report increased awareness for the February 27th goal that's yet to happen. And so that's coming up here shortly. But hopefully that makes sense where we changed the goal a little bit. And that is the 5 areas. And like I said, so this is for the 25-26 school year, progress report, if you will. And the 26-27 will happen in the fall. I'll present that, I think, in November, right around there.
Okay. Thank you, Daryl.
Yeah.
And thank you for offering further details on the discrepancy with the 40% and 96% reported. And your event at the end of the month sounds wonderful.
Yeah.
Board members, do you have any questions or comments? Okay, Corey?
Hey, Daryl, good to see you. Thanks for being here.
Yeah.
And also have appreciated your leadership with the Equity Advocacy Committee as well. So look forward to our next meeting coming up here soon. I got the question about Area 4, where you're talking about the differences between the 40% and the 96% and the disconnect there and the potential for dissecting that data further by age group. Is there any concerns about identification of students? I know it's a small population of students. If we do age differentiation, does that jeopardize any of that?
Right. So that's what we're gonna have to see next school year what the cell sizes are, because you're exactly correct. If they're too small, I wouldn't feel comfortable reporting that out publicly. And so we'll just have to see what our cell sizes are next school year when we do that. And we have also talked, so the SSIS, there's, you may have heard of a lot of the social emotional work that's social emotional learning that's happening currently. And so as part of that, there may be a change in that SSIS survey. And so we're thinking of changing that survey as well. That's being used. So it'll be a little bit different. It'll be a social emotional engagement tool that I've used in the past. And so we may switch to that instead of the SSIS. And so, yeah, we'll just have to keep an eye on what the sample size is. And if it's too identifiable, then we just keep it broad and vague.
Very good. Thank you.
Yeah.
So do the American Indian students have to take any separate surveys or questionnaires, or it's all the same thing that all of the other students are taking?
Yeah, so for this report, they took the same. The SSIS was implemented district-wide, and so they took the same survey that everyone took. My thoughts or my hopes, which the APAC group also agreed with, is to have a separate survey that gets a little bit, it's a little more nuanced to American Indian students themselves. And so that's the thought, is to have a little bit more specific survey to gather some of the things. One of the questions that I'm going to try and wrestle with to try and incorporate is sense of pride for the Native culture as part of that survey, just to see where students are at. We do a fair number of field trips and activities to expose the students and parents to Native culture, different aspects. And so I'd like to try and see what if students are benefiting from those field trips, if they're taking away that sense of pride, that sense of ownership of the Native culture.
Nice. When they take the general surveys, do they have to self-identify as American Indian, or do you know which students are in so we
Right.
know
Yep.
they don't have to self-identify?
They don't have to self-identify, we just know the names of the students. And so the results of those SSIS are quite confidential due to the nature of them. And so there's only a select few in the district that actually get those results. And so that's part of the challenge, is that I have to go through other people to get the results, because I can't just pull them up and see them. And so it's a little dissecting of getting the results by way of other people, because I can't, it's kind of locked down, if you will.
Well, it sounds good that they're locked down, yes.
Yes,
In
yep.
this day and age. And then I was wondering if you could just give us a few examples of internalizing factors and externalizing factors.
Yep. So internalizing is kind of that negative self-talk. I'm just really simplifying it. So like the negative self-talk of if there's someone that's just mental health is down on themselves, whereas externalizing is if there's something that's externally causing that negative. So it's not just the student themselves internalizing things, but there's an external force that's changing their social emotional health, if that makes sense.
Yes, thank you.
Yep.
Very good. Thank you so much for being here tonight. Oh, and Dr. Hillman.
I just want to compliment Daryl on his leadership of our American Indian program. Locally, we call it our Indigenous Parent Advisory Committee. You know, for years we held the one meeting. A few years ago, we started having more than one meeting, which we thought was really great to be able to encourage families to be part of this. And Daryl and Sybil Betzinger, who is our family navigator specifically for Indigenous students, that's a result of the American Indian aid that we receive from the state, have just done an exceptional job of bringing people to the table, finding out what they want for their students, and really delivering on that. And so I want to just give an all call to the community, and I see Colton here. I hope Colton can get this in the Northfield News for us. But if you've not ever heard Dr. Troyer speak, you will be in for a treat when he comes for the community event. He is an exceptional speaker. He is known internationally for his work on ensuring that people understand and appreciate Indigenous cultures. And I strongly would encourage the board to attend that event, and also would want the community to attend. He is a highly sought after speaker, and we have had a relationship with him for several years, and it's really going to be something you don't want to miss. It's going to teach you a lot about our friends and neighbors, and especially from our Indigenous communities, and I think people will find it very valuable. And really appreciate Daryl and thinking through, we could have brought him back for our staff, but having someone of his credential come and speak directly with our students and then with our community is really a privilege. So thank you, Daryl, for getting that going, and thank you for your leadership of this really important affinity group and making sure that every one of these students feels safe and valued and knows that we are here to support them.
I to echo Dr. Hillman's, I've seen him 3 times in the last couple years, and each time was just fantastic. So yeah, he is a fantastic speaker.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're on to item D, which is our financial forecast follow-up. There'll be 2 main items there. There's the board renewal of operating levy timeline and the potential budget restorations. Dr. Hillman and Director of Finance, Val Mersdorf, will present.
I will start this one off and ask Val to help as we move ahead. So in the board packet, you have a timeline for the potential board renewal of the 2017 operating levy. And it is really important for us to make sure that people in the community understand what we're considering here and that they are fully aware of the process and the timeline. So the 2023 legislature changed the statute the statute references 126C.17 subdivision 9, that now permits locally elected school boards to renew an existing operating levy one time under the exact same conditions that the voters originally approved the operating levy. Val and I are recommending that the board consider renewing that operating levy that we passed in 2017 as part of the upcoming fiscal year budgeting process. And we just really need the folks to understand how important the operating levy is to us. It is $9 million of our revenue, or around 13%. One of the reasons that the legislature authorized locally elected boards to renew the operating levy one time is because a study across Minnesota shows that virtually all renewals of operating levies pass. And you all know what goes into an operating levy campaign and the important work to make sure that it is appropriately shared with the community. So there's this piece that, virtually all of these referenda have been approved by the voters when it's a renewal. And so the legislature gave this legal authority to locally elected school boards, who could, of course, be held accountable at the next board election if the community disagreed with it. But renewing this is so important because it gives us the ability to have fiscal stability. And we are now in a time frame in which you can renew it. There's a specific time from the legislature. It actually opened for us last summer, and it would extend through next summer, as a matter of fact. And so we think this is the right time to do it. If the board were to choose not to use its statutory authority to renew the operating levy, we insist that you direct us to go for the operating levy renewal this November. To have 13% of your revenue dependent on a vote just before it ends is something that we just can't support. We have to make sure that we know where we're at with the operating levy, so that if you were to ask us to go out for a renewal, and in this highly unusual circumstance of a renewal not passing, we would still have an opportunity to go to the voters one more time. So you have a choice. You can choose by resolution to renew the operating levy, or you could choose to direct us to bring it to the voters for an operating levy renewal. Val and I recommend that we use the statutory authority to be able to have you, the locally elected school board, renew the operating levy. And what we have is that we've got a timeline for you, is if this is how you would like us to work through it. We discussed it initially in January as part of the financial forecast. Tonight is the formal presentation explaining to you what we're doing, why we're asking you for it. We would then have a follow-up discussion from board members at the next meeting. The statute requires a public hearing, and that meeting has been scheduled for March 19th in the ALC District Office of Gymnasium upstairs from 6 to 8 p.m. And that March 19th, we had originally held it for the later school start times public event, but we decided to push that back at our last work session. So we thought it's already on the calendar. Let's use that. So that's the requirement, to make sure that we present this to the public in that way. We would come back in April and we would have you review the feedback that we got from the public hearing. And then on April 27th, we would ask you to vote to renew the operating levy by resolution as permitted by statute. So I understand for people in the public that this is pretty new. There are several school districts across the state that have renewed their operating levies under this legal permission. And we feel it's important to make sure that we have that fiscal stability and the predictability of the operating levy. Again, it would be under the same exact conditions that the voters originally approved. So you can see that in your packet. So for us, that for 26-27, that's $2,249.44 per pupil. It has an annual inflationary escalation clause, and it was approved for 10 years. So we would reapprove it for that exact same set of criteria at whatever the rate was that year, plus inflation. We'd increase it each year by the inflationary cost, as we have done since it was passed in 2017, and it would be for a term of another 10 years. So we really want to make sure that the public is aware of this, and want to make sure that people can look back and say, yes, the district did a very good job of making sure that people understood what we were asking, what the timeline was, and what the board's responsibility was for it. Val, would you like to add anything?
I think you covered it all well.
Board members, do you have any questions or comments at this time?
All right, very good. Then we'll move on to the next item, which is the proposed 2026-27 operating capital and long-term.
I think we had one more piece under the,
Oh,
there was a.
yes, I'm
yeah.
sorry. Item 2 there.
You want to talk about the potential restorations?
Sure. So as presented in January and December, we ended significantly better than anticipated due to some fortunate circumstances. And so our future outlook looks much more stable than we were originally projecting. And as we shared with the community, the budget reduction process is challenging, and so we always have them rate. If circumstances were to change and we could add things back, what would that look like? And so there's a handful of items that were higher ranked than others, and we've evaluated, what where the packages landed in terms of their original goal and how much was actually reduced. And so there's a handful of things that, as an administration, that we've been just thinking through and looking at, considering recommending. Also, in addition, looking at what would that future impact be to the financial forecast that was just presented. Do you want me to go through specifics?
No, I
Just
think,
kind of
yeah,
talking
tonight
that
we
we're
just wanted to
looking
make
at
sure
it?
that board members and the public knew that we will be coming back with some recommendations for restorations for you to consider. Certainly, of course, it's our job to advocate and your job to allocate, in that circumstance. And so we are looking at that feedback, and we're looking at which of those will we bring back as recommended restorations. And it may not be now in the exact order, right, that the community groups had ranked. We now know how the budget reductions have impacted the district over the course of the last 9 months or so. And so we think that we have a greater amount of insight into what the kinds of things would be the most urgent, if I were to say it that way, to bring back this year, or for next year, excuse me.
Okay. Yeah. Board members, do you have comments at this point? Okay, now we'll move on to item E.
Now you can yes.
The proposed 2026-2027 operating capital and long-term facilities maintenance budget. And Justin Robley, our Director of Buildings and Grounds, is he here?
Val is he got called fire duty.
Okay. So we'll have Val present, and we can direct any questions to her. This will be an item in our February 23rd board meeting, an item for action.
All right, so I'm going to present first the proposed budget for operating capital and long-term facility maintenance. And then you're stuck with me for the indoor air quality as well. So, I totally skipped right past the first slide with the fun picture. So, as you know, operating capital and long-term facility maintenance is really our restricted funds that support larger purchases for the district. Long-term facility maintenance is specific to repair and retaining buildings in their current state. So think of, all the boring things, roofs and tuck pointing and making sure the parking lots don't have potholes and things like that. And then operating capital is really pretty heavily used for technology, some lease levy and those sorts of things. But this is the new playground at Spring Creek, which was a very exciting prospect for the students and staff and families there. The darker blue, just so people are aware, is a poured-in-place surface that allows better access for students with disabilities. And then it's mulch around the rest of it. But student input, family input, PTO input was an exciting process. And so that opened up right before school started. As some of those construction projects go, that's how the timing worked. But that was a great addition, a combination of both long-term facility maintenance for the port in place and operating capital for the actual equipment. So as you know, we like to start out with our strategic plan and our vision of preparing every student for lifelong success by developing critical thinkers who are curious and ready to engage in our society. Obviously, most of my presentations are pretty heavily focused on stewardship. And I specifically chose this picture because we have an incredibly talented buildings and grounds team. I couldn't even tell you what they're doing here, but I know that they're fixing something instead of paying a contractor to come do it. So we're very blessed in this district to have incredibly talented and dedicated staff supporting the buildings to do some of these projects. So what is capital? LTFM is a little more straightforward. Capital has a couple components that I'll talk through. So operating capital is one formula that is a levy, local levy and state aid combination. It's prorated in the state formula. Lease levy is a second formula that is specific for educational lease opportunities. We use that for things like the ice arena time, the Dundas Stone time. We use that for our lease responsibility for the Cannon Valley Special Ed Co-op space. The capital levy is our voter approved portion that basically just supplements and enhances what we can do with operating capital. That was increased in 2022, I believe. And then long-term facility maintenance. So we include those all. The first three are actually coded to operating capital. And LTFM is its own separate code. So they each have their own restricted fund balance. They are part of the general fund. So when I present the general fund later in the spring, these numbers will be included. But we have specifically moved this presentation earlier and asked for approval separately because once the budget's approved, that allows our buildings and grounds team to move forward and actually secure contractors and get all of those things. And it actually has saved us quite a bit of money, making sure that we're early in getting contractors because, as you know, the school construction season is very short. And all the school districts are, especially in this area, are really vying for the same contractors. So that's been a good strategy for us to help make sure we're getting everything done on time, on budget, within what we're expecting. And then I'll talk about that part a little bit later. So overall, this is about $4.8 million of our general fund budget. So operating capital is about just shy of $895,000. Lease levy is about $453,000. Just for reference, oh, that's totally cutting off part of my. It doesn't have the LTFM on there, so I'm not sure where that number went. But LTFM is one of, yeah. It's hopefully in your packet, but. Lease levy, we have authorization up to about $896,000 or somewhere in that range. Based on our student population, we have typically levied about half of that. So we've been in that 400, 450 range for several years now. And then the capital levy, that's that voter approved, 2.2 million. And that does increase each year based on how much our total taxable market value increases. And then our LTFM is the purple 27%. We get annually between like 1.3 and 1.4 million. The capital levy is now the largest portion, that voter approved increase that we had in 2022. And so in terms of the revenue summary, you can just see how they're broken out here. Yep, 1.3 million. And then the kind of historical, so we have 2 years of our audited final data, and then the 2025-26 revised budget is what we're expecting to happen this year, along with what we're proposing for next year. So overall, very similar. I will just highlight the sale of equipment and rebates is 0 because we do the equipment sale every other year. So all of our device leases are on a 4-year cycle, offset by 2 years, so that every other year we're doing that, which you can kind of see in the 23-24 results and then our 25-26 budget. the rebates are really hit or miss depending on what the projects we're doing and what rebates Excel might have available. So that typically is not budgeted, just because we're really unsure of how much it could be. So again, overall about 4.8 million. In terms of expenditure, oh, I forgot to talk about the picture. That is all, actually, I don't know that it's all, but it's most of the MacBooks that were just sold. We had budgeted about 100,000, and the quote, the highest bidder came in at about 142, and they came up and picked all of those up and transported them to their facility. So that's what the staging looks like for that process. So on the expenditure side, again, overall from year to year, this has been relatively consistent. The leased facility space and assessments, again, has been in that 435, 463. That does include about $10,000 extra for any assessments for our properties that we have. The lease purchase agreement, you'll note that that's been decreasing year over year a little bit. That is because in 24-25, we paid off the Sibley, it was Sibley on all the paperwork because it was from 09-10, the Spring Creek addition. So that is fully paid off, and now what's remaining is really just the lease that we have to pay off the shop building that we purchased. That was a lease purchase. And so that has, I think, 3 more years on it. The building program allocation is a calculation where we give a discretionary allocation per student to the buildings, as long as a few like activities gets an allocation to support athletic equipment and things like that. Music gets on to help support buying new instruments and those sorts of things. So that's about 165,000. Textbook and digital curriculum is really the amount allocated to support our instructional services department in their curriculum cycle review and making sure that all levels and departments have the up-to-date curriculum. They have a cycle so that they're getting evaluated on regular intervals. Technology leases includes the iPad lease, the MacBook lease. The MacBook lease is new this past year. And it also includes the software, the Arctic Wolf software, which is our cyber liability security software. I think that's all the ones that are included in that. The software licenses, you'll see that's a new line. So that was one of the items that was recommended in the priority-based budget reduction process last spring, to move anything that was capital eligible from the general fund technology budget to the capital budget. So that's about 441,000 is what we're projecting. And just to be clear, that includes both educational, like instructional licenses for Lexia or the software they're using in the classroom, and non-instructional ones like our Skyward software, which is a student information software. So it includes all of those components. The network administration, again, is those very narrow salary and benefits that can be coded to capital, which is really only people that are working on the equipment that the capital budget can purchase. And that was actually a budget recommendation from our first round, I think, of priority-based budget reductions. So that's projected to be about 700,000 next year. And then the capital committee recommendations, after we take everything off the top of all the things, we have whatever's left to make sure we remain with a decent fund balance and align with our goal. Our entire leadership team comes together and there's a list everyone generates. Justin Robley, our director of buildings and grounds, meets with each building and does a walkthrough to say, what are the bigger things you're seeing? And then he can go through and say, this is LTFM eligible, this is capital eligible. And then that administrative team basically ranks and prioritizes and then comes up with that amount of the projects. So that is about 300,000. Again, that's decreased from the last couple of years because of that software license move. And then long-term facility maintenance is about 1.2 million. I have a little more detail on another slide. That has a lot of different components to it, which I'll talk about in a minute. So these are all the categories that are authorized for LTFM. There are very explicit definitions from MDE about what can and cannot be spent in LTFM by these categories. And so the first 6 of them are what used to be referred to as the health and safety funding. So that process has been retained, but they just kind of lumped it up into the long-term facility maintenance. And so that includes things like our annual inspections. So the theater rigging has to be inspected, and the elevators have to be inspected, and child nutrition has to be, all the food service equipment has to be inspected. All of that stuff happens in that, like environmental health and safety or physical hazards. Asbestos removal obviously is a health and safety issue. Fire safety, again, making sure all of the systems are working appropriately. That's a lot of that. And any expenditures to make sure we're maintaining or updating those systems would go into that. Starting with 367 and down are the new LTFM eligible codes, or new codes since LTFM was created, I should say. So accessibility is really just if you were adding or changing to make something more accessible, which is pretty self-explanatory. Building envelope would be the tuck pointing, that sort of thing. Electrical interior surfaces is probably the largest one we use, and so that is painting, replacing carpet, tile, all of those things. And mechanical systems is another large one, making sure that all those systems are up to date and working as needed, because that's a pretty important part of running a school. So 1.2 million is the current projection. So the forms, this 10-year plan that we're required to do for long-term facility maintenance, the forms don't actually come out until May and are due by July 31st. And so there's a handful of projects that Justin and I are going back and forth on whether or not we can make them happen. And so I would anticipate bringing a revised budget either in June or July in conjunction with filling out that 10-year plan to make sure we have everything as up to date as possible. But right now, these are the ones that we know about for sure. And there's a whole document that supports those totals. So in terms of the things that we're planning to do, the capital recommendations are replacing the playground, the oldest playground at Bridgewater. I want to make that clear. There's 2 separate kind of playgrounds. The oldest one would be replaced, and similar to Spring Creek, we would put in a port in place with that particular playset. If you have kiddos at Bridgewater, you will know that the slide has been broken for several months and repaired several times because I've heard about it a couple times from my kids. And so that'll be a good addition. That playground's been in place since Bridgewater was built. Staff iPad replacements. I want to be clear, these are not on our student iPad lease. These are a separate, we buy them outright because we can get them to last more than the 4-year cycle. And so that is for licensed staff and some educational assistants, among a few other couple things. A new mower. If you don't know, we have quite a bit of acreage that requires mowing in the summer. And so that was on the list. And then a UV controller for the pool. That helps with managing the chemicals and using less chemicals is really what I should say. Other things for LTFM, updating the staff bathrooms at the NCEC. New restroom partitions at Bridgewater. There's like 4 doors at the middle school that are getting fully replaced because they're leaking and bent and things like that. And some hand washing stations at Spring Creek. That's a snapshot. There are many, many more items. that go into that, but those are kind of the big ones that people would really actually notice. So in terms of a summary, again, 4.8 million is the revenue. Expenditures totaled about 4.5, and so the ending fund balance being about just shy of 1.8 million. But again, there's those two separate buckets, and so operating capital we're expecting to end about 265,000, and long-term facility maintenance at about 1.1 million. And so if you recall, well before long-term facility maintenance, we always wanted at least $600,000 in operating capital in case a boiler stopped working and we had to replace it, because those are not inexpensive. But now with this, we have two different goals. So operating capital, we try to keep at least 200,000, and LTFM a minimum of 600,000. So operating capital had a few things that came about all together, and so we're building that back up just to make sure we have that that fund balance at that minimum level. But again, these funds are pretty consistent year over year in what we expect for the most part. And then this is the 10-year plan. Again, there's more detail that will come in July when we do the 10-year plan approval with those the documents that are required to be submitted to MDE. But really, we expect between 1.2 and 1.3 million in revenue. It's based on student count, prorated based on your average building age, and so overall, that's even if it's declining slightly, it's been pretty consistent. And we are at the max building age, so we're not having that prorated at all. And then expenditures, you will notice, is much higher in the first couple of years, and then it kind of trails off. It is significantly harder to know what we're going to need to do in 10 years than we do in the next 3. So some of that is just a product of the way our spreadsheet is set up, and we are working, we had some transition in the buildings and grounds department, and so we're working to combine the comprehensive facility assessment that Wold did with our existing spreadsheet to have a much more comprehensive long-term view. So that is in progress. So I anticipate in the next year we'll have that up and rolling. So this will look a little different in the future. But again, 10 years out is still pretty challenging to predict when a lot of the long-term facility maintenance is whatever comes up that year, if something breaks and that sort of thing. But hopefully that'll give us a more detailed view of the next 10 years, but that's where we're looking at right now. And again, growing that fund balance is never a bad thing in my opinion, because things like roofs are coming out of that. And if we can pay for that in cash rather than having a bond and paying interest and those sorts of things, that's always a better option. And then I just wanted to do a stewardship spotlight. So the Buildings and Grounds Department spent a lot of time this past summer updating the entire district to LED. And so we have been looking at this for, I don't know, at least 3 years probably, because we know that it financially makes sense, that we'll get the return on the investment. But our original proposal from a company was almost $1 million with about a 9-year payback. And that was full retrofit of all the lights and the light switches and all the things. And we just couldn't swing that financially with all the other things that we were trying to accomplish. And so we were just waiting to find the right package. And some Excel rebates came available in the past year. And they replaced all of the light bulbs, 14,000 LED tubes. And after all the rebates, the net cost to the district was $85,000. So we went from a 9-year payback to a 9-month payback return on investment, which I thought was a great story. We hired an electrician intern for the summer to help with that project. And so I just think it's one of the only times I'll tell you that waiting saved us money. So I just wanted to highlight that because I thought it was a great highlight of what we can do with this fund, with this funding. And again, I'm going to share the stewardship spotlight. And this is a picture of the pool side by side. They have done a significant amount of work on it in the last year, balancing chemicals and doing all the things. So we always want it to look like the one on the right. So that's a lot of information, but I will gladly answer any questions you might have.
Good. Thank you, Val. Great story to end with as well. Board members, do you have any comment or question at this time? Hey, Jeff.
Thanks for your report. I know that idea behind the light bulbs was a good one and very successful, so I'm glad you pulled that off. Just a little bit of feedback on the pool. I mean, obviously, I give kids a hard time because I say, you realize that a lot of them don't even realize that underneath the weight room, that's where the old pool
Yeah.
is. So what kind of comments and feedback as far as maintenance and things that you hear about how well our pool is perceived, and just general comments on the pool, I guess?
Sure. I would say Justin can probably give you a much better answer to that question than I will, but I will do my best to fill in. My impression in the conversations that I've had is overall, it's well received. I know this year has been particularly challenging with indoor air quality concerns, where they could smell it throughout the building and things like that, and they've worked hard to figure out what was causing it and correct it. And so I think overall it's pretty well received. Again, with anything in the district, there's points in time where things are failing and need to get replaced. And so they've done a lot of work this year to make sure that it's temperate as appropriate, and that the airflow is working correctly. But I've not heard anything challenging or negative, other than just kind of like the normal things you would expect with having a pool in a building.
And the other part would be, I mean, it's unusual to have your main pool in like a middle school, which I would think around, maybe not, but that's just kind of the way it worked out for construction when we were doing that, so I guess
Yep.
it's okay. And I have actually heard good reports on how good the pool is, and that people are happy with it, so thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, Cory? Oh, okay, Amy?
Thanks for your report, Val.
Yeah.
As I was looking through all your LTFM numbers, it seems like there was some fluctuation over the years in some of the categories, which made me wonder if, like, the fluctuations were, they had like asbestos removal and mechanical systems and others. Is that in preparation for the Reimagine High School project, or how is that high school project impacting LTFM now? Are we doing things to prepare for it? Are we not doing things because and holding off because we know that's coming along? Just if you could talk about that.
Sure, absolutely. So some of the fluctuations are just based on the projects that we're doing. So you'll probably on the LTFM one where I broke out by category, I think it's under physical hazards. There was a pretty big jump, and that was for the Spring Creek poured in place budget that we had anticipated, because that goes under physical hazards, playground safety and all those. And that was because that was the project we were doing that year. We also had a pretty conservative budget estimate because we were not sure exactly how much square footage and how much it was going to cost. It came in much less than anticipated, which is great. The mechanical systems, again, is really hit or miss. The biggest cost of that is when we have our consultant come in and actually make sure that the system's updated and they're replacing panels and doing all of the kind of behind the scenes work. That's extremely expensive to make sure that because those are building wide systems that really have to integrate well. And there's been a pretty significant effort to make sure everything's updated, not only with the technology behind it, but all the systems are in place to support that. And so that has been a focus of the last couple of years. In terms of the high school specifically, we have absolutely been delaying if reasonable. We're not putting off things that have to be done. I want to be super clear. But if there are things that were on the 10-year plan, like resurfacing the tennis courts is a great example. That's clearly going to be part of the project. And so that's something we're going to move off the 10-year plan. We're going to push it because it's not going to be needed for another 10 or 15 years or I'm not even sure how often that is required. But so there are definitely things that have been moved or just taken off the list because they aren't going to be necessary right now. And so we don't want to be evaluating those among all the other buildings and other things that are needed, knowing that in the next 2 years, it's getting updated. So it's a little bit of a combo answer to your question, but yeah, we are definitely, there are some things that are still happening at the high school in preparation. I just talked about one this morning and now it will not come to me because I'm on the spot. But if there are things we can do in advance to make the bond dollars go farther, we absolutely would do that as well. But I would say for the most part, we're reserving the LTFM for the other buildings and the systems that really need to get updated with no other funding source, if that makes sense. Does that answer your question? Yes. Okay.
Anyone else? Okay, Val, thank you so much. And
Yeah.
now you're going to do the air quality, is that right?
I am. So I checked in with Director of Buildings and Grounds, Justin Robley, this morning, just to make sure. So the indoor air quality is required to be approved by the board every year. And so this year, you probably noted in your packet there were no changes. And so that's, I think, been the case probably for the last couple of years where there haven't been significant changes. We did just get the results of our annual indoor air quality survey. So a survey goes out to all staff, and we just got those results. And there are always a handful of things that people express concern over, and those are already being worked on and addressed and evaluated. Some of them, are simple, some are more complicated, but we work with IEA to make sure that we're checking all the boxes to make sure that people can feel comfortable in their spaces if they're not for some reason, but nothing major in the survey results from my understanding, and no changes to the overall plan. So I think we're in a good spot as a district and no concerns of note to report.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
And that will be an item at our February 23rd meeting. Board members, do you have any comments or questions at this time? Okay, thank you, Val.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Our next item is item G, Policy Committee Recommendations. These will also be an item for individual action at our next board meeting, February 23rd. Dr. Hillman, do you want to make any comments?
Yeah, so in this evening's board packet are several policies that are being brought to you for consideration for update by the policy committee. Want to remind board members and the public that we generally have a two-step process with board policy. So this is the first meeting that you're being presented with them at. Tonight's a great time to ask questions or clarify. And then we'll of course ask for your approval at the next meeting. So oftentimes that second meeting, there's a little less discussion. We want the public to know that the entire community has an opportunity to hear it and then weigh in with board members before it is approved or considered, I should say, at the next meeting. So I'll go through the policies briefly here that were in the packet and then would entertain any questions. First one is a new policy that we're recommending around Minnesota paid leave. So the Minnesota paid leave law went into effect on January 1st. We are in that implementation process along with the state. So anytime that you're implementing a systemic change like this, there are always things that as you get into it, you determine, yep, we do think we should need a policy on this. Typically for something like Minnesota paid leave, we would have preferred just to have left the law stand. But as we start to see how it unfolds, it's clear that there's some places where we need to really clarify what's happening within the district related to the Minnesota paid family leave law. So in that new policy, you'll see a number of things in terms of just general descriptions, etc. The key part that I want to point out that is really customized for our district here comes toward the end of the policy when it is really talking about the concept of what's called topping off, or what that means is allowing an employee to braid together the amount of leave and compensation they would get under the state leave law with local leaves that are already existing in our contracts. So in general, in most cases, what we know is that employers have the right to determine whether employees are allowed to top off, is the term, or braid those together. In most cases in our district, we will not permit the braiding of those two systems together. The one exception is the 8 weeks of paid maternity leave. As you know, we negotiated that with the association several years ago, adopted a district-wide policy for someone who has a baby in our district. They have 8 weeks of paid leave. They do not need to use any of their own leave for that. And so in this case, we would allow that braiding to happen because there would be some compensation that would come from the Minnesota paid leave law, and then the district would fill in the rest up to what their complete pay would be. So there's both an advantage to the staff member who's taking advantage of that, and then we are getting relieved of some of the financial burden, from that very innovative and forward-thinking policy that we adopted several years ago. So I want to be really clear about that in most cases, we are not permitting what's called topping off or the braiding between the two systems of paid leave and our local leave system, except for that one spot where we have a person taking the district paid maternity leave. So that is policy 410.1. That is a new policy. I wanted to point that out to you. Policy 426 is actually a policy we're recommending for you to sunset. As you recall, as part of the priority-based budget reduction process last spring, data told us that we have very few employees who use the employee assistance program. And so the determination was that we would no longer pay for that and it would be sunset. So since we are no longer paying for that particular service, we feel it's appropriate to sunset the policy. You will also see on policy 502, which is around the searching of student lockers, desks, personal possessions, and a student's person. In this case, we are updating the purpose statement. You'll also notice that we've provided a little bit more detail in terms of, number one, who is a school official under this particular policy. We're just doing some updating there to make those positions align with the current positions that we have. There were some antiquated roles in that description. You'll also notice that we're just fleshing out just a little bit, what does it mean? What does a search actually mean? And so giving a little bit more description, and the new sentence is, the scope of inspecting a student's person includes but is not limited to a student being directed to empty their pockets and or removing their shoes. So just trying to help people understand what does that search look like. It also provides the person being searched the opportunity to request the search be conducted by a school official of the gender the person being searched prefers. So that provides that opportunity for that student to have that ability to make a request of who is doing the searching. So those are some of the updates. We also have just updated a few other things, parents and caregivers, as we've been looking at that over time. And then also just being clear that it's the Student Citizenship Handbook that the violations are governed by. So that's policy 502, the updates there. 527, this is the student use of and parking of motor vehicles, patrols, inspections, and searches. And you'll see very few here. What you'll see is we did add in section 4 that students may be required to pay a fee to park their vehicle during the school day, just to align with other policies and that long-standing practice. We just were able to make a little bit more, provide some updated and clarity around things like if we were to use canine searches, and then there's a handful of other items that, again, student citizenship handbook update, pretty limited updates there, but things that we want to make sure that we point out. We also did some basic updates in the student parental, family, and marital status non-discrimination. This was really, the biggest part here was there was a duplicate entry where there was a segment that was really copied and pasted in 2 places, so it's just for clarity in that one, and that really is the only change in that particular policy. So those are the policies that we're bringing to you for first reading this evening. I'd stand for any questions that people have at this time.
Thank you. Hey, Corey.
I have a few questions. None of them are that consequential. On 410 with the new policy about Minnesota paid leave, I noticed an acronym MNPL, and I was curious if that was something that was documented on the state site or was an acronym recreated. I just didn't know if there is an acronym. I just looked through the paid leave site. I didn't see one, but didn't know if consistency would be good there to help minimize any confusion for staff who may read that policy in the future.
Yeah, so if you look at the purpose statement, Corey, we talk about Minnesota paid leave. I don't know if that's the acronym that the state is using. We were using it for simplicity in this
I
particular.
realize second reference, but
Yeah.
didn't know if it's MPL, for example, in the state system. If
Yeah.
there's a direct, I realize that's a very
I'm
minor
going to ask
thing. but-
Val, have you seen, I mean, you've been deeply involved in our Minnesota paid leave. Are you seeing the acronym MNPL being used by the state?
I don't know if we've seen it necessarily at the state per se, but in all the conversations amongst other districts in our, like, we're in a statewide kind of group where we can ask questions, like, that's definitely been consistent, but I'm not 100% sure if it's that way at the state level.
Again, not something I'm recommending necessarily, but and it's referenced there correctly. So, 502, I had a question about process. I know the policies are on a 4-year rotation, and this, I'm bringing it up here. We had some position changes in last year with some of the budget changes. So, you added the head of assistant principal, you added the dean because that's a new position. In other policies that were not in this review process or coming up in the next few months, how do we make sure those align with current positions? So in 3 years, we don't get back around to, we should add dean.
So we have not accelerated that process, but one of the things that we do after, not we, what Kelly Spillman Kramer, the executive assistant to the superintendent board, does after each board meeting when you approve new policies, we have one large PDF file that includes all of the policies. And we do that, that's on our website, so you can get it and search, so that you can search the PDF if you're looking for something specific. You can search that entire, I'm sure it's hundreds, if not thousands of pages of documentation. And so what we can do is in our review this month, when we update, we can certainly do searches for things like assistant principal and some other things to make sure that we have gotten as many as we can in this round.
And I bring that up because I know it's cumbersome and arduous to go through all these, and on a 4-year cycle, things are going to get missed. So just helping think about how we can minimize having inconsistencies in the policies.
And this is a good example. This is the type of thing that as we continue to utilize generative artificial intelligence in our work, this is the kind of area where we have seen some real success at accelerating our work. So we can look at using the tool that we use from Anthropic or ChatGPT to do some comparisons and put in some key terms that we're looking for. Appreciate you bringing it up because it is because we look at things at least every 4 years. It is possible that we do have some antiquated terms from time to time, and we're continuing to work to try to accelerate eliminating those. So we'll certainly do a little bit of a deeper dive.
And the
It's a
board
great-
had
great
previously
suggestion.
given authority to update some of those minor things without coming back to the board, correct? So if you want to change
I
it,
would say
fine.
overall, I think that, Corey, what I would say is that I think in this case, for example, we didn't consider these particular changes as things that didn't need to come back to the board because it's very specific about some of these are not replacement positions. Like, for example, we're striking the parking lot security monitor, that was sunset. But we are adding a dean and instructional coaches for behavior. So that's something where we're changing the, who has that authority.
of authority,
So we think
yeah.
that that's important for you. If it was more of a update the name, that's different.
Last one I have is concerning 528, similar to what we were just talking about. You have Molly Wieselman listed, and I know she has submitted her retirement, for the end of the year. So this is a current policy we're approving, likely wouldn't get looked at for another 4 years. How do we ensure that someone who's not going to be an employee in 5 months is not listed as a contact?
So I think that's another great question. And there are employees who are referenced but the Director of Human Resources is a significant notation in many policies. So thinking about this earlier tonight, your impression, because as I was reviewing the policy, I thought the same thing. I think what we'll do is bring you forward an action as part of our policy process that, beginning July 1, that the district would be authorized to replace Molly's name in these policies with the new Director of Human Resources. So that would give us the permission to be able to do that in all policies without having to bring each of them back to the board.
Okay, thank you.
Sir. Good questions. Jeff or Amy? Amy? I'm gonna.
Oh, go
throw it
ahead.
to Amy
Just one quick comment. I mean, I'd say instead of a name, why don't you put in the position?
So we do, and so Jeff, it's a great question. And in many cases, actually, there's some, I'm not gonna say requirement, but some strong suggestion in some of these pieces to, especially around non-discrimination claims, to give not only the position, but the name of the person, because you're trying to accelerate the complaint process. We
I would
prefer
say
to do the way you said it,
Yeah,
but
but
we've-
if you did both, then if you knew that somebody was there and retired, they would go, well, who is the current?
Right.
Right.
All right, Amy.
Two things. First, I just want to say, in general, the policies have come a long way in the last 10 years, less than that. But I mean, as far as formatting and consistency goes and all of that. So kudos to everybody on that. I think they're much better. And it's exciting to think that we have tools at our disposal to make them even better. So that's great. Then I just wanted to put in a comment about 502, just to say that I'm on the policy committee, as is Jeff and Maggie, and we spent a lot of time going back and reviewing that again after our last discussion that we had with the full board. And we talked to Principal Gelano, and we asked him lots of questions. We must have spent at least a half an hour with him understanding how he uses the policy, and we came away from it pretty confident that what we have here is going to work.
Thank you. All right, we're on to item 6, our consent agenda. And as a reminder, there were some personnel items in the table file added to this consent grouping. Is there anything anyone would like to pull from the consent grouping for separate consideration? Is there a motion to approve the consent grouping? Thank you, Amy. Second?
Second.
Thank you, Corey. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? All right, motion passes. Item 7 is our items for individual action. We have one resolution among them. Let's see, and I'll take a motion first, and then we can discuss. Is there a motion to authorize the administration to make recommendations for additions and reductions in programs and for adding or discontinuing positions?
I'll move.
Thank you, Corey.
Second.
Second, Amy. Okay, is there any discussion on this item? This is something that the board reviews about this time every year. Any questions or any comments?
I think it's important for the public to know this is a standard resolution that's taken every year, and it really kicks off our staffing process. So you'll be seeing those staffing recommendations coming forward in the next few months here, and hopefully even in a more accelerated timeline. We've moved up some of the dates for notification of retirement and leaves and things like that. So our hope is that we're able to accelerate that so that we can have our plan for 26, 27 in place much earlier than usual.
And a copy of the resolution is in the board packet. If there are no other comments or questions, then Kelly, will you hold a roll call vote?
Butler,
Aye.
Garowitz,
Aye.
Quinnell,
Aye.
Gonzalez, George.
Aye. Okay, and the resolution passes. Thank you, Kelly. Item B is our board committee assignments. Again, I'll take a motion first. Is there a motion to approve board member committee appointments and representations to various organizations and school liaisons for the school year 2026?
Motion.
Thank you, Jeff.
Second.
Thank you, Corey. Any questions on that document at this time? Okay, Amy?
Just a small one. I'm happy to be on the finance committee. I'm also happy to be on the facilities committee, but twice a year that they occur at the same time. So if that's not a problem, I just wanted to mention it.
Okay, we can,
Yeah, that's a function of our effort over the last couple of years to have that larger committee night. So we could certainly work through that.
yeah. Okay. Any other comments at this time? All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Yeah. Motion passes. And then finally, item C is our policy committee recommendations. Is there a motion to approve the policy committee's recommended changes to policies 443, 505, 507, and 520.1? I'll move to approve those committee recommendations. Can I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Amy. Any questions on those policies? Questions or comments at this time? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion passes. Okay, next are our items for information. There's the later school start times workshop, a recap. And so, Dr. Hillman, if you'll give us a recap from that January 29th session.
So on January 29th, the board met in a work session in this room, in the boardroom here at the district office. And we discussed, it was the second work session that we had. We had one in December. And so we reviewed any thoughts that board members had about the research and the presentation that Dr. Kyla Wallstrom from the University of Minnesota provided for you back in December. We shared with you some validated data about school start times. We had been polling. We did use some generative artificial intelligence to mine all of the high schools in Minnesota start times and end times. We then sent out all of that information to superintendents through the Minnesota Association of School Administrators listserv, and had many, in fact, I think it's probably about 2/3 of the schools validated their times. We're still working to get some of those additional times validated. We gave you, we also showed you some other data around just how schools cluster in their start times in terms of early, middle, and really later school start times. So Dr. Miller from our board had done a visualization for the board, and we shared that. The link to that is also in the packet tonight. And then we went through a couple of different examples, just give you 2 ways to look at starting and ending time schedules, and those are also in the packet. They were simply just for discussion purposes only, to start to hear where the board was thinking about these start and end times. You'll also know that we talked about other transportation issues. We talked a lot about busing. We want to thank Lorraine Benjamin and Nancy Johnson and other representatives from Benjamin Bus who were at the meeting to talk about, the real precision that has to happen as part of our tier and a half transportation system. And so lots of discussions about that. We shared information with you about activity releases, because if the end of the school day is later, that likely means that there are more students who will miss more class over a period of time, because we've analyzed over the last year all of the departure times for away contests, and we gave you an overview and a summary of that. And then we really just had general discussion about the positive aspects and the areas that we still need to study. I do think that the general consensus that I heard in that discussion with the board was to slow down the process a little bit. I heard a lot of people talking about really aligning any changes with the 2028-29 school year, when the high school facility has real completion, and especially the completion of the bus loop and some of those kinds of things to facilitate this. I did hear board members interested in continuing this discussion. So our next layer that we're going to be working on is we are finalizing several schedules, and all we're doing is beginning and end times right now. Based on the conversation that we heard with the board, you'll probably see 4 different options. We are going to give those options to Benjamin Bus and ask them to do the precise work of when would the pickup and drop off at each school need to occur to be able to continue, that really robust transportation system that is predictable and very useful, obviously, for our families, but it needs to be predictable. We need to know it can work. They're going to give us their feedback about what should those start and end times be. I'll bring that back to you, and then we can continue the conversation from there. The schedule between the start and end times, that's a little bit more of a management, discussion about what time does first period begin and end, et cetera. What we really need the board to weigh in is, are we going to move forward, and what is the start and end time, for the school day? And as we discussed at the work session, the potential of additional cost to transportation depending on how you would proceed. So that's my overview of the session. I would certainly welcome board members who were there to offer their reflections. And I just want to let the public know, all of the documents that were discussed at that work session are in tonight's packet.
Excellent. Thank you for doing that and for publishing that on the website. I thought it was a productive meeting as well. It was really valuable to have Benjamin Bus there, so thank you for organizing that. And one of my, I was very impressed with the fact that we could, as a board, be nimble with that and decide to move the timeline. That we could slow down. One of the things that they were saying, Benjamin Bus was saying, is they need more concrete time and a longer amount of time to draft up some suggestions. And so that was really helpful and meaningful for us to take a pause and let Benjamin Bus work with some more solid figures. There was also a board member, so you know, a community member who emailed asking why we don't record our work sessions. And so we can have some discussion about that at a future meeting. Any other comments? Corey, Jeff, Amy, about the session? Okay, Amy?
I just want to thank you, Dr. Hillman, for organizing it. I think we had a lot of information. I was very impressed with what Ben pulled together for us as well. And I thought it was a very robust discussion and eye-opening at the same time. Just what are we needing to think through, and how could this happen, and can it happen? So thank you for organizing it.
Anyone else?
Can I make one more comment? I think every time we talk about this, because it's going to be a longer discussion, we should come back to the reason that we're discussing it, because people will access this conversation at different times. So the reason that the board has asked us to look at this is the really robust set of research that talks about advantages and benefits specifically for teenagers, their health, their academic performance, and a number of other things related to the change in their circadian rhythm that researchers have determined happens around the time that a young person reaches puberty and then extends to their early 20s. And so there's over 30 years of research, most of it really rooted right here in Minnesota at the University of Minnesota, looking at various ways that later school start times have positive impacts for children. So specifically, we talk about academic improvements, improvements to reporting, self-reporting about students' mental health, those kinds of things you heard Daryl talk about earlier tonight. And then very concrete, very detailed pieces like fewer athletic injuries, fewer car accidents with teenagers who go to a school that have later school start times. And so these are all the reasons that we're discussing it. And then the challenge of implementing something like this is really around some of the logistics. And so that is really what the board has been talking about, are those logistics. So I think it's important for us just to bring that back to the community. It's really about student health and well-being and their academic improvement, all of the other pieces that are rooted in research, and then you're trying to figure out how can you make it work logistically in a district our size. So we're not the only ones doing this. I've actually had a request from several school districts for that start and end time spreadsheet that we did, because people are saying, we're also talking and looking at this again and would like to make sure we can collaborate.
Good. Oh, Amy?
I just want to add significant increases to academic performance. So that's important. Less absenteeism, less tardiness, which also feeds into the academic performance, but also a lot of athletic benefits as well. Better able to play as a team, better healing because you're getting more sleep. So if there is an injury, people can get back on the field faster. There's just a lot of very positive information out there about making this change.
Okay, we'll move on to item B, which is the enrollment report. Dr. Hillman, if you'll review the February 2026 enrollment report.
Yes, you'll see that we have decreased by 9 students since the report in January. And so at this moment, we are 9 students behind the projection that we had for this year. That's the second time this year that we've been behind projection. And we know that enrollment does fluctuate. We are usually pretty precise and close on our projections over time. And we know this is natural to see it go up and down a bit through the year. I do want to point out, though, that you will see some significant changes, what I would consider to be significant changes, really related to the high school, where you'll see that we went from 1,195 students in January to 1,177 students in February. And if you take a look at that corresponding with the number of students who moved to our online program, the Big 9 online program, going from 55 students last month to 72 students this month. And we know that a number of these pieces are related to some of the current immigration enforcement issues in Minnesota and some of the fears that our families are feeling. And we know that families trust us. They know that we will do everything that we can to keep their students safe. And at the same time, we're seeing this shift. A significant portion of it is to offer that online program. It's, of course, our online program is just not a stand-up program that we're doing right now. It's something that we have had for some time for students in grades 4 through 12. So we have an established online program that we have great confidence can provide those students who need that at this moment in their lives, the support that they need. And I look forward to a relief where students do not feel that they need to take that step. So the data is the data. I'm just simply sharing my observations about the data and would be happy to answer any questions that board members have about it at this time.
Board members, any questions on the enrollment report? Okay, Corey?
Question for Val, just for clarification. So that was a shift about 18. We're down 9 because we get half FTE or half per pupil, I mean, for those who go online in terms of the
Yeah,
count.
we get about
40%.
40%, yeah.
Okay, so 18 shift, about 9. Okay,
Yeah.
got it. Thank you.
Okay, Amy?
Do we have a sense that there'll be additional people shifting, or is it just because we were between semesters and it was a good time to shift? Can people shift in the middle of a semester?
So in general, we have some timelines for when people shift to the online school. It's usually a full semester. I know that Daryl Keller, who is responsible for our online programming as well, has been working with principals about the potential of some modifications to that at this point, just due to the unique circumstances that we're responding to. But typically it would be that when you enroll, it's for the entire semester. And part of that is that we know it can be more successful in online if you are there consistently over a longer period of time. But we are facing some unique circumstances and are working to support our families. So generally, there's a line that you are going to enroll in that program for the semester. We're just we're considering modifying that based on the needs of the families who are using it at this time.
Are we letting parents know of this option, or does
Yep.
word of mouth seem to be
So
taking care
parents
of it?
know about this option because we have had it for a long time. And so if, as families ask for it, we're not doing any more marketing of it, if you will. But we have it on our website. It's something that people have known about for some time. And then we're making connections with folks based on those needs.
All right, we'll move on to item C, which is the construction update, number 22. Would you like to let it stand or make some comments?
I will let it stand.
Good. Board members, do you have any questions for Dr. Hillman at this time? Okay, Corey?
It's not actually a question related to the item. Is that okay?
You have a,
It's related to the future meetings. I was wondering if we should add March 19th on there for our public hearing.
sure. We can add that.
It's either going to ask now or interrupt you later.
Sure. So we'll then move on to item 9, which is our future meetings, and those are a regular meeting Monday, February 23rd, 6 p.m. in this boardroom. A district committee meeting March 2nd, 6 p.m. in the gymnasium. Monday, March 9th is another board meeting, regular board meeting in this boardroom. The March 19th community forum. And can you remind me of the time
Yep.
on that?
That'll be from 6 to 8 p.m. and it will be upstairs in the district office gymnasium.
And then Thursday, April 2nd, 5 p.m., a board work session, again on the topic of later school start times. Right, item 10 is our adjournment. That's all the business that we have tonight. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Thank you, Jeff. Is there a second?
Second.
Corey? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye.